we have with us a very special guest, Mr. M Damodaran, former SEBI Chairman. Mr. Damodaran, as always, pleasure talking to you and having you on ET now.
Thank you, Vijay.
So this is going to be the 5th year where the Gatekeepers of Governance will have its round of debate on the whole of corporate governance issues. What is going to be the big theme this year? Because clearly every year you have set the agenda when it comes to corporate governance.
Well, this year, as you said rightly, this is the 5th year. When we set out on this journey a few years ago, we did not expect that we will get to see so many violations on the corporate governance front. So the journey has moved from being more academic to addressing issues that are very topical, very current, very thought-provoking, very disturbing. But then again, we don't focus on individual issues. We just look at the lessons that they have thrown up for us. When I say us, it means practitioners of governance, those who are in the governance space, lessons for regulators. How do you respond to those? So the overarching theme is to reinforce the message that corporate governance is a necessary condition for sustainable performance. We're looking at different attributes of governance. It's not unidimensional.
Mr. Damodaran, if I could ask you, as you are rightly pointing out, this would happen at a time when we are seeing many boiling corporate governance issues, particularly the one involving India's biggest regulator, RBI. How do you see things happening there at the RBI board? Perhaps government or the RBI board somewhere cross the line, or perhaps it's a healthier debate that is happening, which perhaps would have a good outcome. How do you look at the events happening at RBI board?
First, let me make a point, which is that we often talk in terms of independence of organizations. Independence is the wrong word to use. When you look at organizations like the RBI, what they have and what they should have is functional autonomy, which is a few shades different from independence. That said, RBI is a creature of 1934. Over the last several decades, there have been differences between the RBI and the government. And there must be differences, because if both are having identical thoughts at all points of time, then you are not getting constructive debate going. The needs of the nation will not get addressed. So there have been differences, there have been standoffs, but none of that played out in the open as it happened this time. There have been instances of governors not able to endorse the view of the government then in position and demitting office. But a continuing standoff which in some sense, brings up issues of, is RBI accountable? If so, to whom? Is there more transparency needed in the way it functions? Should it address more issues of more people than it seems to be addressing at this point of time? Some of these questions have been thrown up largely because of the standoff. And I think the major casualty, and I'm not blaming any individual for it, is that we should have witnessed more maturity in the conversation. Somehow an element of immaturity crept into the conversation.
From both sides?
I would say from both sides. Provocative statements were made, and that's not the way to have an engagement which is constructive, which certainly must be an engagement where one side challenges the other so that the best results come out. But there's a way of conducting that conversation, and I think we failed there.
Mr. Damodaran, if I could ask you, I'm asking you because you have occupied the highest chairs in various positions at various points of time. Was that letter perhaps using the Section 7, the flashpoint, and at this point of time, the way things stand, if you have to give an advice or both the sides come to you, how do you see the situation going forward should be tackled, or perhaps what steps needs to be taken?
Firstly, an issue of this kind should never play out in public. These are conversations that you can have in private with the RBI and the government. Section 7 has been on the statute book ever since the statute came into being, ever since RBI came into being. The point is, there was never any mention of Section 7 either in any correspondence to the extent that I am aware, or in any public conversation that we will use the powers of Section 7. Section 7 is Brahmastra. If you use it and it doesn't work, there's nothing left to be used. And I think the evidence of the healthy respect and a constructive conversation between government and the RBI is borne out by the fact that Section 7 has never been used in all these years. You didn't need to use it. There is challenge, there is response, there is a conversation, there's give and take, and ultimately you decide willingly or unwillingly that, okay, this is the way to go forward. Section 7 mentioning that in the letter was, to my mind, completely unnecessary.
Mr. Damodaran, I know this is one issue perhaps will be dealt threadbare and discussed during your summit in a couple of days from now. If I could ask you, the whole composition debate of RBI board, the way it stands, do you see perhaps the composition, because we also have some of the biggest names from different verticals of corporates with their best experiences sitting on RBI board, perhaps the composition and particularly the government nomination is where perhaps the problem starts and where they try to put in their weight and the RBI and the RBI governor and deputy governor perhaps resist the same?
See, normally when you appoint persons to the RBI, I would imagine that there would have been a discussion and a broad sense of agreement on the names. And then you go ahead with nominations. You've had people representing different industries on the board of RBI because you need to bring in the experience of the real sector to impact on the way RBI goes about its work. Otherwise, it will be a sterile academic exercise. You need to bring in the real world into that. And you've had corporate chieftains for years who've been on the RBI board bringing that input. Now, you cannot take away the power of the government to nominate whom it wishes to nominate. That's the power of the government. But that said, what is it that you can get out of every individual on the board in terms of what he or she brings to the board by way of experience? That is where skillful leadership resides. You take the membership as a given, you take the composition as a given, and then see how can I get this to perform in the interest of the economy, not the interest of the RBI. The interest of the RBI is only a means to an end. The interest of the economy is the end that we are looking at. The composition itself, if you remember, the RBI board always had only one member from the government, a government officer. Now you've added one more a few years ago, so you have two people from the government. So that was in some sense the first major change. Why did government need two people on the board as against one earlier? It's not that government's brief was never carried out earlier with that one person on the board. Now you are finding that composition is being focused on because there is a sense of unease that issues are being raised in the board. Well, board is a place where issues get raised and resolved. That is why boards exist. Boards don't exist to rubber stamp. I think all of this is good. All this debate is very good. And then we will see post somewhat extended conversation that things will settle down and the organization will function very well.
So I know you need to rush out. Last couple of questions. On the whole IL&FS, that is once again an area. Last year we had debated the whole of Kotak Corporate Governance Committee report. SEBI started implementing it. Taking that and now the experience of IL&FS, how do you see perhaps things would have been different if Kotak Committee reports were implemented, or clearly IL&FS once again was a sitting duck ignored for the longest of time?
No matter what regulations you have, no matter what laws you have, there will be some people that will act in a manner inconsistent with law. I am not for a moment rushing to judgment and saying that that is what happened in the IL&FS. I think what happened in the IL&FS was the business model was unsustainable. In addition to which, and the problem got compounded because there were receipts from government departments that did not come in time. So they were operating on the edge, as it were, and it needed only a little push to push them to the other side when the defaults started coming up. It's not that there was an absence of laws or regulations. So I don't think that implementation of Kotak Committee recommendations any more than it was implemented, a lot of it has been implemented, would have addressed that issue. You need to look at audit reports, you need to look at regulation, you need to look at the way the board went about things, and now to think that the board was sleeping, well, it was not. For 2 years the board has been discussing which investor to get to come and help out, but that didn't work out. Some things don't work out even with the best of intentions. So I think it's a case where one shouldn't rush to judgment. You should wait for the facts to come outside. Concurrently, you also need to fix the problem. It is not that you only focus on the inquiry, you also need to fix the problem because it's a large institution.
So auditors is one word which comes across when it comes to any of the scams, any of the governance issues. SEBI in that sense has been taking a tough chance. If it relates to a listed company, we will clamp down even if it's an auditor, Satyam being the best case. Now NAFRA has been formed. Somewhere do you still, there's no clarity, and somewhere auditors needs to be made more accountable at the macro level, particularly the way the experiences have been?
No, I think auditors are accountable for what they do. The point is the nature of the audit function itself. If you look at the report of the auditors, it is hedged in by so many conditionalities. You're saying the management gave us this information, there is judgment involved, we only looked at a small portion of the transaction, all of which is right. You can't do an end-to-end audit. Where will you have the time to audit that kind of thing? But where I have a problem is that if there is something that you've seen that's not right, the auditor should flag that immediately. The audit committee should flag that. I think equally along with audit, you need to focus on the audit committee. The problem with audit committees in India sometimes is that audit committees think that their job is to justify management to the auditor. In fact, their job is to extract value from the auditor to see how the company can benefit. If some things are found wrong, how do you address those things? So if audit committees don't get their responsibility right, if auditors do a job that is less than what they should be doing, clearly somebody should pay the price, a stakeholder will pay the price.
So Damodaran, my last question, I'm asking you this. IDBI is one institution which you headed.
Yes.
You have seen the institution from very close quarters. Now we all know how it's panned out, what is the state of affairs. LIC has been once again used to bail out IDBI, if I could say that vehemently. Over and above, it's been asked to do an open offer for IDBI. Somewhere, this role of LIC sitting on both sides and bailing out as and when required by the government, do you see this perhaps is biggest corporate governance violation? Only because LIC is not listed, perhaps they go scot-free?
No, well, LIC is a regulated entity. There are limits to what LIC can invest in any company. They've been given exemptions. They've been given exemptions so fast that it makes you feel uncomfortable. As soon as the application was filed, the exemption was given. And the justification that the LIC needed to own a bank, well, LIC has significant shareholdings in other banks and they could have simply increased those. The open offer is an effect of law. If your shareholding is above a certain threshold, you have to make an open offer, so the open offer will be made. That is not something that you can quarrel with. But to get LIC in, again and again, you ought to look at whether policyholders' money is being put to good use. Is this money that could have been returned in larger amounts to the policyholder if you are sitting on so much of excess? I think this business of one institution that is so large being used to help out and portraying this as a commercial decision of the LIC, but that institution being used to help out several others, you don't know what's happening to the organization itself, that institution, and should things go wrong there, then you have a huge problem.
So clearly we know how the markets behaved in the last couple of months. Unprecedented. I have been covering SEBI for the longest of time. We saw on a weekend on a Sunday a joint statement coming in from RBI and SEBI. Clearly at the macro level, you headed SEBI, you have seen the markets from close quarters. Our markets have come of age, and any sort of volatility once again has been proved, particularly with domestic inflows flowing in a lot, that we are a market which can resist and withhold any of the FPI pullouts or the volatility.
I don't think volatility is an issue in the marketplace. The issue in the marketplace is, are your systems robust? Will your systems be able to handle the kind of transactions that take place without any breakdown? Because once a breakdown happens, then people lose confidence in the system. And I think our Indian systems are very robust. We've seen it time and time again. When markets move significantly in one direction or the other, the system is able to capture that, and there are prescribed ways in which you address that. That you have short-term shutdowns if there are significant increases. So our systems are as good as any that you will find in the developed world. The real issue, the one that you touched on, is you need to have more and more domestic investors in any market. A market cannot be captive to investments of foreigners, because that money is not coming because of love of India. That money is coming because at a point of time, this is the market where you got the best returns. If other markets give you better returns, that money will go. Or if, as we saw in post-2008, institutions needed to take money out of all markets in order to fight fire at home, the money will go. So you can't bet on a long-term sustainable growth of a market on the basis of foreign investments. You have to grow your mutual fund industry, and I'm glad that we're looking at better numbers in the mutual fund industry, which shows that more domestic investors are really looking at India as an investment opportunity.
So come Friday, Gatekeepers of Governance, 5th year, which is the topic from 2018 do you think would dominate the discussion and set the agenda as always every year that you do?
Well, I think one of the issues that will get addressed certainly is, and that is what we're addressing in the inaugural session with Mr. Anand Mahendra and Mr. Uday Kotak, is there more form than content in our regulation? Are we regulating too often? Are we making laws too often, making changes too often, without allowing it to run on the basis of, the content holding fort for some time? Take the latest exercise that is in the pipeline. Now, you take Section 8. Section 8 has been reverted to the original formulation of the 2013 Act, because in between you made a change, and now you've gone by a notification, and then you've gone back to the 2013. Now, you can't have this business of what I call legislate in haste and repent at leisure. You can't do that. You must ensure that you think through something. Don't have a proliferation of regulations and laws. What you have, implement those properly, enforce those properly, ensure that your surveillance, investigation and enforcement, that trinity kicks in. That's what you need for an orderly conduct, not more laws, not more regulation.
Mr. Damodaran, once again, thanks a lot. Pleasure talking to you
Thank you.
as always.
My pleasure.
Thank you, sir.
Entirely.